Hello, world. You're listening to episode 1 of Phase Cancellation, a production podcast featuring myself, Ohm The Protector, and of course,
myself, Jason Medkoff, known as Jorts. So is Hello World how we're just going to start it from now on?
It feels like a good one, seeing as, you are also kind of a programmer by trade, and I've messed with it a bit, and I've thought about intros, and it just feels like whenever you try to address, if you say, hey, gamers, gamers has a weird connotation to it, but I'm pretty sure at the current moment there's no aliens listening, so hello world feels like a pretty good, just kind of broad description of whoever might be listening.
Oh, we can always change it to Hello Worlds later.
Yeah, we can expand, just kind of play it as we go. It's still early. Definitely.
So let's talk about this intro music.
Yeah. Those of you who are keenly listening may have noticed that there was an intro this time. And if you have listened to any of our music at all, you definitely know who it was by. So please take the stage. I want to know more about this.
All right. So this was an excerpt from a song, which is in the near future, will be featured in a rhythm game release called Club Fantastic. And Club Fantastic is a project built around the game Stepmania or In the Groove, which is basically like open source DDR. It's a rhythm game based around foot pads and hitting 4 arrows in the correct order with the correct timing. And basically what's happening is this project has been created to create a whole bunch of new content for the game in the pandemic era. And one of the big focuses of the project is to put emphasis on the musicians and the artists and the steppers or the step artists, the people who program the rhythms. So I'm very excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, it was on someone else's request, right? Like you were kind of invited into this little program. I don't know if you would call it.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure what to call it either. I call it project. Because that's pretty much what it is.
Project, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the whole thing is organized by an organization in the Bay Area. That's just like a community organization around DDR, Stepmania, ITG. Basically, the project lead reached out to me via email, through Bandcamp, and was like, "Hey, do you want to, are you interested in doing a commissioned song for this project?" And I'd never gotten any email through Bandcamp before, so that was a first. But it was also just kind of surprising in general because no one's really reached out to me to commission anything before. Plus, this is a project which already has an established release. So it's not hopping on board some indie game developer who is totally disorganized and you have no idea. You have no idea what's going to become of the project. Likely it's going to crash into a ditch or something, which I've unfortunately been on some of those before. But yeah, this whole thing has had a release already, late last year, with some reasonably big names in the scene and some even bigger names on the next release.
Right. And so what is that process like? Did he just say make a song, figure it out, do it all on your own, or what are the kind of requirements for making a song for something like that?
Yeah, so that was one of my first questions as well, is sort of around the requirements that are in place. The most obvious is that the tunes are around 2 minutes in length. For obvious reasons, if you're doing crazy intricate rhythm and footwork, tech, intensive rhythms and intensive foot placement and jumping around and all kinds of crazy shit. You don't want to be doing it for too long. So 2 minutes is kind of the baseline. And then the guideline that he gave me was, quote unquote, to make something in the 140 to 150 BPM range, something Complextro inspired, which, if you know me, is totally speaking my language.
Right. Yeah. You would currently be one of the people to go to on this topic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what he hit me with. And I was like, all right, sure, I'm on board. And so I got involved with this whole team, which is a bunch of visual artists who are doing like the artwork in the backgrounds, and like programmers who are working on like skinning the game and like doing tutorials and like development work, and then the step artists who are like the guys who program the rhythms and actually design the charts, and then of course all of the other musicians on the project also writing music, and then a few like people in the community who are actually like in like the DDR and Stepmania and ITG community, kind of guys that like if you look up American DDR tournaments, the sort of names that you would see. So it's kind of interesting.
Right, definitely a serious project, not just like you said, small indie thing. Like there's some big names involved. And it sounds like there's a lot of space for good feedback too. I mean, having those the people who, I mean, if they're literally playing in tournaments, then they know what's good and they know what's bad. They give input on both the music and the step making or the map makers. Um, I'm wondering what that process is like. Did you just make the song and then beat makers just like made a layout for it, or did they make the layout then you made the song, or was it a bit of both? What's that process like?
Essentially, what happened is I got the guideline for what to make the track, complextro in the 140 to 150 BPM range. And so I pretty much went and just started working on stuff. And I guess the most difficult part of it, honestly, was the 2 minute time limit. Cause like I'm used to working within a form factor that's like 4 minutes at least, right? And
Mm.
even up like 7 minutes. Like I've got a track on my next album, which is going to be like 7.5 minutes long or something like that. So I'm much more used to like introducing multiple ideas and then kind of dwelling on them for a while. But this one is a lot more like rapid fire. Like you kind of have to pack things in pretty dense in order to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like for this style of music, like yeah, I guess it can be like incredibly back and forth really fast. And like in my brain, that's making me think, oh, it should be easier to like fit into a small time frame. But I mean, like you're saying, you've got so many ideas that you might want to put into something and dwell on them and bring them back and push them away and then bring it back again. So did you just like have to reduce the number of total ideas, or do you just try to like speed the process up? Like how do you decide what gets to stay and what gets to go in 2 minutes?
Well, essentially, I took kind of a more prescriptive approach to composition this time around. Um, I knew that it had to be 2 minutes, and I knew what my target BPM was. So I pretty much like in Ableton Live, like I just like created a new MIDI track and I created some empty MIDI clips, and I would name the clips, like intro, breakdown, drop one, drop two, whatever. And sort of figure out beforehand how long I wanted each part of the tune to be so that I could focus on composing to fit that segment rather than just like composing without any restrictions and then trying to shoehorn it into a small segment. So, yeah, pretty much when I put the track together, it's like, okay, there's going to be an intro. There's going to be like a sort of intro dubstep drop to kind of hype you up. Then a short build up, then like drop number one, shift styles a couple times to keep things interesting, then kind of ramp down and then build back up into the second drop and then finish the second drop and then you're done. And it's like all so quick that each section is like 8 bars at the most because there's just not a lot of room to kind of dawdle. And the other thing about it is that kind of goes hand in hand is because it's like a rhythm game, and it's only 2 minutes long, you have to have something going on like for every second of that 2 minutes because the guys who are programming the steps have to have something there. You can't just come up with some random 16th note rhythm out of, a beat that is just like a solid quarter note. So you have to have all sorts of fills and like, syncopated rhythms and all sorts of business going on like throughout the whole tune.
Yeah, that makes sense. I personally play way too much Beat Saber. And that's often something that I've noticed in the songs that are actually made for Beat Saber. Yeah, there's very little breaks, there's very little in betweens, and they're generally pretty short. But when someone goes and makes a custom map, and there's this like 30-second intro, and they're trying to like fill it with something, there's like four blocks that you're hitting like every 10 seconds, and they're just like synced randomly to some word that someone says, and then like the music starts all of a sudden, and it's not a smooth transition at all. Um, so like yeah, the way that these rhythm songs have to be constructed is very particular. Um, and it makes sense that these songs are shorter. There's a couple of very like 6 minute long songs in Beat Saber, and I need like there's some like 30-second breaks in the middle where you're just like listening to the music because I'm like almost hyperventilating. Um, Even here, like you have in this song, there's like a couple small pauses. Are those like just little breather moments, or is there still like pretty active beats like the whole time?
There's still stuff going on in the charts. Like the expert charts are done, and it's like crazy good. Like shout outs to Warp Drive, who is the guy who stepped this chart for this song, but also stepped like the three songs that I had released in the past that he also stepped and were like included in packs in the community, and like I had no idea. Like when the project lead reached out to me, he was like, "Oh yeah, a few of your songs have already been stepped, and they're out there in community tech packs." And I'm like, "Huh?" Like I had no idea, but yeah, sure enough, there it was. But yeah, anyway, the higher difficulty like always has something going on. Like even in
Mm,
the kind of calmer parts, like there's still something going. There's never like a true pause in the rhythm or in the gameplay. But of course, if you have, maybe 4 bars of like kind of a simple passage right before you have to launch into like, a crazy 16th note run or something, then it gives you a little bit of a rest, I suppose.
makes sense. I'm curious, like, do you have one of these DDR pads? Like, have you actually like been able to test this at all?
No, no. I I was a GameCube kid growing up, so
Ah,
I didn't have a PS2 and the one Dance Dance Revolution game that everyone had on the PS2 that
mm,
came with like the crappy like cloth pad or whatever.
the rollout mat thing. Yeah, with just the buttons shoved inside.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've never been into this scene in particular. I played like a bit of Osu like a few years ago, which is like, totally different in its execution. It's kind of similar in the way that songs are done, where well, for Osu at least it's kind of like a legal gray area because they kind of assume that if you're mapping a song that you have all the rights to map the song, which no one actually does. So which is why you see like all kinds of different songs, like stuff that commercial releases and all the way down to like completely niche tunes, which is good for the community because then you can get lots of songs, but it's kind of,
Right.
like I said, shady from a legal perspective. But that's one thing that this the Club Fantastic project is kind of pushing is the music is all like unlicensed, and the goal is that no one will ever be able to like chuck it into a content ID database so that streamers who play Stepmania and ITG can stream or create content on YouTube or wherever without fear of getting copyright strikes because the music isn't copyrighted.
Right, and that copyright fear's been growing a lot. Twitch was, I mean, one of the biggest streaming platforms was fairly lax on it for a long time, but past couple months they really started kind of cracking down on people having copyrighted music inside their streams. So, like for those streamers who are just suddenly like, what do I do? Like this is my content is playing these songs. It's awesome that this project kind of supports, them having a way to still get, some new songs and still be able to play them without, like you said, having to fear the copyright overlords.
Yeah. bringing my personal stance on all that sort of stuff into the picture. I don't want to get too into it, but basically, I support um, what Club Fantastic is going for, and I think it's really rad that it's creating so much interaction between like musicians and the step artists and the visual artists and working together for a pack that is just for the community to use, however it likes.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to see it come out. I want to see like some YouTube videos of this, because I've heard the music, but I haven't seen the steps, obviously. So I definitely want to at some point, yeah, actually see the song in action.
Yeah, you will. Whenever the season 2 trailer comes out, the season 1 trailer basically showed, brief snippets of all the songs with the steps, and probably something similar will be done for season 2 with the trailer and all the songs and their steps. But undoubtedly there'll be people, recording themselves playing it, streaming themselves playing it, all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
Is that you can go and record and stream without fear of being struck down by copyright AI.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into like the huge label talk or anything, but I had recently started using a service called DistroKid, and when you're uploading, especially to YouTube, there's a little checkbox that like you can pay like a couple extra bucks to add your song into the content ID system, and that was the fastest like not checking that box I've ever done in my life. I saw that, I was like, I'm gonna not do that option because
Yeah.
I mean, on one hand, I'm uploading my own music, and I don't want to get taken down by myself on accident for using my music on a separate channel.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, but like I don't want someone to like I would want to share my music, at like I'm not going to make the one like fourth of a cent that it would make off of play on some other thing. I want that option to be out there, especially with so much music these days being restricted. It's nice to have music that you can just play, you can just have in streams and in content, and you can just be out there,
Yeah, maybe
man,
it's
live the music.
maybe it's a dated view of the world, but like music is human culture first and foremost. It's not a business. It's not a product. It's not a service. It's human experience. And call me a fossil or a boomer or whatever, but I mean, to me, even as a music maker, not as a huge music maker, but as a music maker, like it's more about the experience, and it's about sharing, sharing the experience and sharing the joy of music with other people than it is to profit off of it.
Yeah, I've never once started a song, or opened up FL Studio and thought, I really want to make some money. I'm gonna make some profitable music. Like it's always just been a way for me to like express my emotions, or just like be creative or hear something in a different way than I've heard it before. And like that's what I want to share. I don't want to, make the 30 billionth version of the exact same song. And yeah, again, we don't want to get too far down that particular rabbit hole, but yeah, it's a good project. Good project.
Well, let's face it. If you or I were in this for money, neither of us would be making the style of music that we make.
Yeah. And like I feel like if you're going into it to make money, you're probably not even going to be successful, because then like you're not going to be super unique, and the unique people are the ones who often are the ones who end up making money once they make their own style of music popular.
Right. Well, on that bombshell, let me try and get a little back on topic here. So when I finished the first draft of the song, I posted it in the Discord, and there's a lot of guys in the Discord who have experience in the rhythm game scene already. So I got lots of great feedback. I opened the track back up. I made corrections. I added fills. I changed things where things needed to be changed. Brought it back. Got lots of good feedback, and they were like, all right, it's done. And then like the same day, Warp Drive started working on the steps and finished those like, I don't know, a week later or something. And there you have it. And then I've also got, custom artwork for it. We worked with a digital artist, and it looks so cool.
Yeah, where does the artwork kind of play into things? You've mentioned artwork before, but I'm kind of struggling to visualize how artwork kind of interacts with this whole setup.
Like when you're going through song selection, each song has like a banner, I guess, that, kind of ties to the song. And that banner is like, a part of the artwork. And then when you're actually playing the song itself, there's, the background. And the background is just the artwork, basically.
Ah,
So it's like there's the background for actually playing the song, and then there's, the banner for the song selection menu.
gotcha.
It just sort of ties into the whole experience, I guess, or the arcade cabinet sort of feel.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a whole complete setup. I imagine that a lot of custom songs, might not have any art at all, or maybe it'll just be like a stick figure drawn in paint. I haven't interacted with a lot of DDR personally, so I could be wrong on this thing. Um, but again, I mean, I'm just kind of relating it back to Beat Saber. Like, I remember KDA. That was a song that like came out by like the League of Legends universe, and there was a Beat Saber version of it. Yeah, and they made a whole new map for it. That had like tendrils coming out of it that's related to one of the characters. And yeah, the more immersed you can get someone in a particular song, really giving it, the lights and the sounds and the steps like really being executed right. I mean, that's what gives a song like that replayability. It's not just, oh, I heard this song once and I'm gonna, see how this beat map goes so I can try it out, once and then never do it again. It'll be like something that someone will want to come back to again and again. So I really hope that pans out.
Yeah, Beat Saber is kind of unique in that it's three dimensional. Things like Osu and Stepmania are two dimensional. So you have the ability to have like a background or whatever.
Yeah.
Like in Beat Saber, the background is basically like the playable area. Like you need to be able to see oncoming things. I don't know. I don't play any Beat Sabers, so
Yeah, it's a few shapes and mostly lights, but yeah, I agree that they stuff like Beatmania and Osu. I have seen some Osu. They can have a bit more fun with it. Like they can really add some shapes. Like in your particular case, like is there any kind of like dynamics to it, or is it just like a static image?
it's pretty much a static image. Um, there is something that you can do with Stepmania called mods, which is like where you get like the arrows kind of like flying all over the place and jittering and all kinds of crazy shit like that. I don't know if any of that's going to be a part of my map, but I don't really care. Like I said, I don't I don't really play the game,
Right.
so I'm not sure what the impact is on the experience. But as far as I can tell, to my layman's eye, the map is like fantastic and just like really cool, and it hits a lot of the rhythms that I would have expected it to hit. So I guess in that sense, Warp Drive and me kind of had the same idea as far as where it was going.
All right. So is this something you'd want to do again in the future if it was possible?
Yeah, and it's well, it actually is something that I've already done again. There's another song of mine that will be featured in season 2, I think. And that's a remix of one of the songs from season 1. That was originally kind of a joke, like it was kind of supposed to be just a meme. But then the guy who wrote the original song like actually sent me the vocal stem, and I was like, all right, I should do something with this. Yeah, I couldn't back out then. So yeah, so then I did something with that track like completely different from the original,
Yeah, once you've got the stems, it's not a joke anymore. It's real.
and that was really fun and also like super well received. So that's a thing. Yeah, these guys will probably be holding on to me for season 3 as well, which will have like a different theme, and yeah, I'll probably write another one or two tracks for them if they'll have me for season 3.
Nice. I'm kind of wondering, like, did you enjoy that? Kind of back to something you mentioned earlier, the prescriptive production process, kind of as you put it, where you had kind of like charted out where everything should be and then just filled it in. Like, did you end up enjoying that? I because I've seen that in some other, maybe a YouTube video where someone's talking about like how strong structure works, and they started doing that same thing. This is where the intro is gonna be, this is where the drop and the breakdown's gonna be, and then just kind of filling it out there. Like, did you enjoy that experience? Like, did you find that like constraining, or maybe was that constraint good?
Well, let me be perfectly clear. It's something that I would only ever do to myself, and that I only ever do to myself because I've done it before and I've done it since. But it's less about going and figuring out what like the standard is for a particular genre to arrange the song, and more about limiting myself in interesting ways. Because what I found, at least for my creative process, but there's lots of other people who say it works similarly for them, is that limitation of the tools tends to breed creativity. So limiting the intro to 8 bars or whatever, or specifying where certain parts of the song are going to happen on the timeline is a limitation, but it's also one that lets you kind of get creative about how you're going to work around that limitation.
Yeah, I should probably start kind of constraining myself more in a sense. Because, I mean, growing up, just kind of playing with the software for several years, just kind of being in a younger mentality, you're just like always excited for the new toy. You want to get the new VST, even though you barely learned the one that you got a little bit ago. Um, and so you end up with all these tools, and maybe not the best idea how to use them to their fullest extent. Um, I've been trying to kind of nail down just, maybe just one or two of them and just use them arguably too much, but maybe that's the point. Um, or maybe if there's a preset that just shouldn't be changed, that's fine. We can just use that one preset this one time. It'll be totally fine.
One of the workflows that I try to strive for is like kind of controlled minimalism, where like you narrow it down to like, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 plugins that you just like know inside out, and those are your go-tos, and you can do like almost anything with them. And then, they fill each other's gaps. Like Serum, I could call my go-to bass sound design synth, and it's really good for basses, but it's not as great for, pads or leads. So for pads or leads, I go to like Hive or something, right? And you build like a small tool set where you know all your tools really well, and then you have some tools that you know really well that you can go to when you know what you need, because you know that you can get what you need from them.
And this is a random, like slightly tangential question that just popped into my head, but I was thinking about Serum, and they have the LFO tools inside Serum. And I'm wondering, when you make basses, do you like link the parameters to an outside control and then automate them inside Ableton, or do you use the inside LFO tools to automate the basses?
That's a great question. Well, since it is very rare for a sound to appear in like a drop or a situation where it would need to be automated for longer than like a beat or two, I do most of the automation, or yeah, I use the LFOs and the envelopes within Serum mostly, because it pretty much has everything that I need. Yeah, I could go and automate stuff like outside, but generally when I'm doing like, Jorts drops and Jorts complex stuff, like a sound doesn't really appear for, more than a beat or two, so it doesn't really make sense to go outside. It's like exceeding the threshold of like benefit versus cost
Right.
in terms of time.
Yeah, I suppose that does make sense in your case. Because, I mean, and that's something that like I've been battling with a lot, of whether to automate it inside or outside. Because automating it inside FL Studio just feels a lot more painful. Like Serum does a great job at just making it really intuitive to link up a bunch of controls to set your LFO timings and everything. Like the clicking and like making new points on that little graph and moving things around and bending everything. It feels so natural. It takes like 20 seconds to make something that sounds pretty nice. Um, Doing it inside FL Studios a, a good bit more painful, especially making it, kind of repeatable. Um, but I kind of have always suffered from the 8 bar producer problem where I'll make, 8 bars and I'm like, yeah, this is great. This is my like 2 VSTs that I have running for this very long time, and it's just gonna repeat forever. So I've had to more and more start doing things outside of Serum so that I can have more control so that, towards the end of this particular 4 bars, I can have the automation changing slightly. Back in the olden day, I did something which absolutely destroyed my computer and just made like several instances of Serum, each one having its own like LFO control. So it was like the same sound, but there was 6 copies of Serum running at the same time. That was not that was not ideal. It worked, but it wasn't ideal.
Also, so in my usage of FL Studio, while limited, I tend to see a lot of people, and I've noticed it myself. The facilities for automation are kind of interesting, where you don't have like lanes, you have like clips, and the clips themselves are linked to the parameter that you're automating. So like if you go and watch like a seamless R bass tutorial or something, he's got like one MIDI clip and then like 5 or 6 automation clips automating different parameters within the synths, and the effects. So it's kind of interesting to me because that's a little different from the workflow that I guess I've kind of adopted for myself. So you say that you tend to do LFO stuff inside Serum. What about other synths? What about like image line plugins?
Yeah, for everything that doesn't have any kind of tool inside, yeah, it's 100% automating inside the FL Studio workspace. And now you're making me wonder how Ableton does it because in general, I do really like the way that automation is handled inside FL Studio because like you said, it is clips. So I can, if I'm just doing a riser, I can just kind of put that one little clip nice and simple. I can make another unique clip that's still controlling the same parameter, but as long as it's not happening at the same time, then it will still control it. And I can automate that freely and say I've got a nice long bass drop going, and it's just maybe that kind of I even forget the name of the genre, but it's a very like just dubstep style, but it's just the one sound and it's just changing a lot. Um,
Rhythm.
I can yeah, Rhythm, that's the one. Yeah, I can make like just a super long chain of like random LFO movements, and then I can keep cutting and shifting that clip around like you would with a sample, kind of like pushing, maybe I want this to happen slightly earlier, copy and paste like 2 seconds of that one clip 30 times. Um, and that way you can have a lot of flexibility in where you're actually putting each particular piece of LFO. I guess it's not really an LFO anymore at that point. Um, but that's something that I'm becoming more accustomed to, and it is greatly increasing the quality and kind of the variety inside each particular moment. If you're only going to have a couple sounds, you have to do a lot with them to make sure that you don't get bored within like the first 2 seconds.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to do it that way within FL's workflow, I guess, because FL is a lot more um it's a lot less tightly coupled than than Ableton or other DAWs, because you can have like even the nomenclature is like foreign to me. It's like there's no notion of tracks,
Yeah.
there's tracks in the mixer, but you can have multiple different instruments routed to a single track, or you can have tracks routing to other tracks. It's not like, okay, this is your track with your this instance of Serum. It's like, well, you have the whole pattern grid where you can have drums and basses and leads like all in the same lane sequentially, and that's something that took a little bit of getting used to for me
Yeah.
when first kind of exploring FL Studio.
Does Ableton do free trials? Like, I feel like I have to download Ableton now and, like, really just kinda get a feel of how it works. Like, I've seen it, I get the general sense of how the lanes operate. I liked the fact that I can put, say, drums and leads in the same lane because, I may only use this particular lead one time in a song, and it helps me kinda save space. I really don't like having to scroll up and down in my workspace. I mean, even some people in FL Studio have, like, you know their entire like 60 tracks, or I guess you would call it lanes full of stuff. But a lot of my songs only end up being like 5 or 6, tall, just so that I can see it all in the same workspace, and I keep trying to condense stuff. Like how long, like, or I guess how vertically long do your tracks end up getting at this point with all these lanes?
Not too bad, because again, I think we covered this last episode, but one of my major habits in music production is like bouncing everything to audio.
Oh, right, right,
So not necessarily everything like different categories of instruments will fall on the same lane, but I can put different sounds on the same audio track
right.
if it makes sense to do so, like in my head. At the end of the day, like if you're not working with anyone else, like the only thing that matters is for it to make sense to you, right?
Mhm.
That's one of the nice things about music production as compared to writing code in like a corporate setting, is when you're writing code you have to make sure that other people can read it too, and unfortunately lots of people don't understand that fact. But anyway, um yeah, I mean, for me it's basically I'll have like a drum channel, which is just like, a drum rack for sample playback, and then I'll have like a few audio channels for effects and like noise sweeps and cymbals and other sort of like risers, downlifters, and that sort of thing. And then I'll have the sub bass on its own channel, on its own track, so that I can like sidechain it independently and control the volume and even the shape of the sub waveform in a very controlled manner. And then I'll have like a track for basses, which is stuff that'll follow the subline. So obviously I need to scoop in the EQ so that there's no interference there. And then I'll have a few audio tracks which are like side chained to the kick and the snare. So whereas like the cymbals and the white noise sweeps and those things are not side chained to the drums, I always have a few audio tracks that are, and those are usually like
Mm.
um, the other drop elements besides the basses, the synths and leads and glitches and all the other complex and stuff like that.
And you mentioned the side chaining. Do you actually like use a limiter and use like routing side chaining to actually reduce the volume of certain things, like to make the kick more prominent, or do you use like some kind of automation to do it instead of using the volume data?
I no, I just use Ableton's built-in compressor for the side chaining.
That's how I do it like 99% of the time. But there's like a couple tracks like where my kick drum, like maybe it was just poor sample choice, where my kick drum that I'm using is just not behaving well. And it's ended up just making more sense to try and automate it. It gives me a bit more control, and I've started to use a bit more, but I'm not 100% sold yet because it does take a bit more time, or it just may not be necessary.
Well, okay, now I have to talk about like a crazy new plugin that I got.
Ooh, okay.
It's called Track Spacer. I forget who makes it, but it's basically like a multi-band, like dynamic EQ sidechain thing.
Oh,
Um, and so what it does is it'll capture the spectral data in like 32 bands of your input signal, and then it'll apply that spectral data like in the inverse to the target signal.
oh wow.
So, for example, if you've got like a bass stab playing at the same time as like a kick drum, and you want to sidechain the bass stab to the kick drum, um, the spectral data that Track Spacer collects from the kick is like maybe the kick is kind of snappy, so it has a lot of transient data like up in like the 4 kilohertz and above range. So the sort of envelope up there will be like really quick, right? But then maybe it has like kind of a longer subtail, so maybe around like 50 hertz, the envelope will be like a little slower and take like, half a second or so. So what it'll do is it'll sidechain the bass stab like per band of those 32 bands across the frequency spectrum. So your bass stab will only be sidechained for, a quick transient up above 4,000 hertz, but then down around 50 hertz, it'll be sidechained for, the half a second or whatever that the subtail is lingering on the kick drum.
Ah, got it.
So it's like, it's really neat for sounds that you don't want like completely ducking out of the way of the kick and the snare, I guess. It's also a little nicer for like busier drum parts.
Yeah.
So like if you're doing like a drum and bass or a garage track or something that has like drums hitting like pretty often, then it's a lot less like distracting and interrupting the other sounds that you're side chaining. One thing that I've also used it for is like side chaining one synth sound to another. So like if I've got like a piano playing at the same time as like a super saw stab or something, I can like use track spacer to sidechain the stab to the piano so that the frequency data in the stab isn't like conflicting and like fighting for the front stage with the piano.
Yeah, I really want to try that now. I feel like that would save me a lot of headaches.
It helps you clean up mixing a lot, and it kind of keeps everything like in the box in terms of like not having too much going on in any particular frequency range. It is very neat.
Yeah, that's something I've thought about a lot, especially, because I'll be using, like I've mentioned before, like maybe only a couple sounds total. So a sound might be totally like well and fine when I've mixed it at its, fullest moment when it's combining with other instruments. But if I want to have it maybe just solo for a few moments, then it sounds like absolute garbage because, maybe I've had to cut so much of the mids to make space for another instrument that now when it's by itself, it's just completely hollow and devoid of any life at all. And so I've even at a couple tracks actually had to start automating my EQs, which I'm not super comfortable with, like unless it's an LFO or something. I mean, at that point, where I'm just like raising like my mids ever so slightly at particular moments in the song, like that drives me insane. That makes me feel bad. I'm sure it's fine, but I don't like it.
Yeah, well, that's for the birds. It's like if you have to go and automate the EQ, like you're looking at so much work.
Yeah.
And this plugin just seems to be really good at taking care of all that sort of stuff. Like I just sent you a link to Waves Factory's page, and they have like a really cute automation or animation on the page, and it's like it shows the plugin's UI, and there's like a blue line and there's like a white line, and they're like dancing like mirrored on like 0 decibels.
Yeah.
Across from each other, and like the blue line is the input signal, so that's what's coming from your drums or whatever, and the white line is the gain reduction that's being applied to the signal that you put the plugin on.
Yeah, and only 3 knobs. Kind of reminds me. I mean, it's a huge meme, in the Reddits, just the sausage fattener. It's like I have no idea what's going on, but there's 2 or 3 knobs, and I'm gonna set them all to their highest level. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Do you want to say not a sponsor? No angry comments.
Hashtag not sponsored.
We're just looking at plugins. If someone does want to sponsor us, like I'm here for that. But yeah, not a sponsor.
Yeah, no, it's really neat. It's it fills like a void of like something that I've needed for years, but never, didn't exist. So I think it's really cool. It's not too expensive, but yeah, it's a very very nice tool.
Kind of a random question. It's like been ringing in the back of my head this whole time, and again, slightly off topic, but that's totally fine. Because I've heard you put like vocal samples in your music, right? You've had vocal chops in there, like that's pretty standard stuff. Have you ever tried actually singing in any of your music?
Uh, I don't think so. Okay, like once. Um,
How did it go?
well, it's like it's awful. So it's like super vocoded, and you can like barely tell, what the original vocal sounded like.
Yeah.
I don't really have a singing voice. It's kind of my voice is kind of in an awkward range. It's like sort of like an upper baritone, I guess. I don't really know. I was never like classically trained in singing or anything like that.
Yeah, I've tried a few times, and this is something that I've told other people when they say like, "Oh no, like you're fine at singing." Like, you and I have the tools to know whether or not we're good at singing. Like if we put it into, some kind of native auto tune. There's one in FL Studio. I don't even remember the name. But like, you can put in the sound of your voice and you can see where the pitch is and you can see like the wavering that's going on. Like you can clerically say whether or not someone has done a very good job at singing at a particular moment. Um, and that's been a struggle. Like there are things that I've been wanting to sing to and it just hasn't worked out. But there's a track that I'm wanting to release soon. This is actually like it's nearing completion and it's like one of the best mixed, like most complex things that I've had to date. And it wasn't, I don't want to call it rap because that feels like it would be an offense to the rap genre. But whenever I've tried to, like, write specific lyrics for something, it's like it doesn't sound genuine at all. Yeah, I just let the same, like, 8 bars loop for about a half hour, and I just talked absolute nonsense into the microphone, and then when it was done, I started chopping up parts that I thought sounded kinda funny and, like, pushing them together and syncing them with the tempo, and, like, it's actually not terrible. And I'm realizing, like, I mean, it's been really good practice for me to kind of get more familiar with just like sampling. I let a glitch effect run for the entire length of it and then started cutting out some of those glitches and applying it to the drop. So it's been really good practice for me, but yeah, really, really strange things, them vocals. Really strange things, but good practice for sampling.
So did you just drop like the production story for No I Don't?
Uh
Because I think that one's got vocal chops, right?
yeah, that one there's it was in one of the it's another one of my huge like sample pack libraries, but there was some like lo-fi sample pack that had like some pastor, speaking, and he was just kind of saying like kind of like random philosophy sounding stuff in that lo-fi vibe. And that's what I use for No I Don't. For the really hardcore listeners out there on my SoundCloud, there was a song called Luminary, and I used, I mean, basically the same technique. Because it's so easy in FL Studio. I mean, I don't know if you have any plugins for this, but there's an FL Studio plugin just called SliceX. And so you just drag a sample into it and it finds all of the transients and marks them as clips and then lines them to a MIDI keyboard. And then I can just go into the FL Studio tools, hit the like strumming, like random arpeggiator tool, and it will just make up just a random assortment of those vocal slices all matched up to what it's thinking is an instrument pattern, and I'm just having it, make some willy-nilly sounds. And I just kind of keep hitting the randomize button until something sounds pretty rhythmic, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. And, let's just drop that. So I've come up with some really lazy ways for making my music. But if it sounds cool, it sounds cool. That's what matters.
Yeah, and in Ableton Live, it's not a separate plugin. It's actually like built into a context menu. Like if you right click a an audio clip, there's an option called like slice to new MIDI track, and it
Okay.
yeah, it does sort of the same thing. You can slice it by transient or by eighth note or 16th note or whatever, and it just basically fills up a like a drum rack. Like I guess FPC would be the equivalent in
Yeah. Yeah.
FL Studio land. And yeah, and it just loads up a bunch of audio clips, and that's how I do a lot of vocal chops. Is like I'll find some nice juicy like melodically busy segments of like an acapella and like stitch them together and then slice them to a MIDI track and then just start pecking out, you know, a rhythm or whatever, moving notes around, sometimes transposing individual, you know, one shots or whatever as appropriate to fit into the key or whatever. But yeah, it makes it super easy.
On the question of, because I was thinking about, you know, those samples kind of applying to a song like I'm kind of like trying to release. I feel like there's been 50,000 moments in my life where I'm been like almost done with a song. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally gonna release this. And it just stays in this like 80 to 90% finished range. Like I'm wondering, because you've talked about, you know, you're making these like really, you know, these wider albums, you know, and they've got multiple tracks on it. You know, are you moving from just like song to song? Like, do you just work on one thing at a time? And you're like, yep, this thing is done now. I'm going to move on to the next thing, start from scratch. Or are you kind of like working up multiple things at a time?
I pretty much only ever work on one tune at once.
Ugh, gross.
Any more than that would be like cognitive overload. If you think about how my music is,
Yeah.
I think of it as like if I like if I spend a lot of time on one song, I can like drain up all of my creative potential, and then I kind of need to like, you know, take a couple of weeks to kind of regain that before I can like start work on another track.
I guess that makes sense. And I would probably argue that's probably the healthier way to do it. I don't know. I feel like I just somehow get bored of like even working on something for 2 hours. You know, maybe it's just like a particular mental blockage, but I'm just constantly jumping between stuff. And it's even gone to the point that I have written myself a batch file that just renders out like my entire works in progress library. And it's just this huge list of stuff. And even recently I'm going back and I'm like assigning like letter grades to them. You know how people make like tier lists. I'm like, all right, these are the A tier things that are like, these are pretty done ish. You know, B tier things like, oh yeah, you know, I want to do something with this, but it still needs a lot of work. C tier is like questionable, probably will never see the light of day, and just it's this huge list, and it all uploads to my Google Drive, and then it downloads back to my phone. And so I'll just like be laying in bed at 3 in the morning, like just flipping through stuff, trying to find like what is the thing that I want to work on tomorrow. You know, what is the thing that's actually taking up my passions at the moment. So at some point, you know, in like the next couple of years, there's just going to be a reckoning of all this stuff coming out, and then I'll actually have to start over from scratch. But yeah, there's just so much stuff in there. It to me, it feels like I have so many things that are done, you know. But anyone who's like looking from the outward in, you know, just looking at my current YouTube, there's like just 3 songs that I just kind of haphazardly threw up there. It's it's a strange experience.
Keep your eyes peeled next week for the tiermaker.com Ohm the Protector song backlog ranking. Hashtag
Yeah.
not sponsored.
And I mean, there's been a genuine desire for me. Like, I just want to, like, I come to these points, you know, where I'm just like, I just want to release all of it. Like, I just want to have some giant dump, you know, or just maybe make like a really weak, like, compilation thing that's like a half hour stitching together of a bunch of stuff. But, you know, then I'm worried because if I ever go back and change it, then it'll be wrong. You know, it won't line up with what I had posted, you know, two weeks, you know, 2 months before. I mean, I have tracks that I want to finish that I started in 2015. You know, I was in a completely different point in my life, and I'm still finishing these same songs, and they're just as done as something that I started a week ago. It's a mess. Got to get organized.
Yeah, I have the same sort of attachment, I guess, sometimes. Like, well, let me clarify something first. When I say I won't work on more than one song at once, I mean like I can be working on multiple ideas at the same time, but I won't like seriously work on like writing one particular idea to completion as a song. Like I won't do that more than once at a time.
Fair point. Yeah.
Um but yeah, I have all sorts of ideas. I have some ideas that are like are fantastic and that I would eventually like to turn into full tracks. And I often have ideas that are like I thought were good, and I just have to kind of come to terms that, this isn't really where I am right now anymore. So I can't really do anything with it. And maybe I change it into something else, or maybe I just drop it. It's just a part of being an artist, I suppose.
Yeah. And I think one of the most crushing losses kind of in that area is, I mean, I don't know if this has happened to you, but having like samples that are part of a project get somehow deleted because you were disorganized and didn't like keep them all together safely. My song that's, I mean, it's on YouTube. I mean, it's on everywhere. The Sphere, like, I don't even have a good pronunciation for it. It's typed horribly. That's how I made it as a whip, and that's how it stayed. Um, but it actually had a completely different sound for a long time. I was working on making like a point and click adventure game with my mom in Game Maker. That was a project that totally got scrapped, but it was fun at the time. But it had like, some like kind of squirrely sounding guy in the background that was, of course, a recording of me, but like saying all these different things. And it was all lined up. It was awesome. And then they just disappeared one day. And it took me like 2 years to finally come to terms with like using fancy search programs on my computer to try and find it. And just like, no, it was gone. And so I spent another hour, I worked on it. I wanted to get it finished. So it sounds different. It's not quite as complex anymore, but at least I feel like I'm putting it to rest, and I can finally move on from that particular trauma.
Yeah, it's certainly happened to me too. And as a result, I tend to be pretty careful about that stuff. Like Ableton has a nice collect all and save feature where it'll just grab like every sample that is referenced in your project. It'll copy it into the project directory so that when you're doing backups and stuff like that, you have all the samples like right there where you need it.
I'm finding myself suddenly so angry that FL Studio doesn't have that. Like, I know that there are songs that still have samples in like my downloads folder and in my desktop and in my pictures folder for some reason. And I'm just, it's so much effort to like consolidate all of it. Come on, FL Studio, what are you doing? People make fun of you already. Don't make it worse. Let's get up to speed here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe for next episode, because I think you've talked about that kind of Ableton 11 has been a thing that's coming out. Um, and so that might be something you'll be talking about next time. So I want to give, maybe if they do like a free trial or anything, just give it a poke around, kind of see what.
They do. Yeah. It's a 30-day demo. So yeah, go grab it.
Yeah, I'll give it a bit of an experience, so that these conversations make a little bit more sense in the future and get a better idea of it. See what I like, see what I don't.
We could try working on a track together and pass a project file back and forth.
Yeah, we've talked about, kind of how the collaboration progress might go in the future, but between different programs, it's just like stems. It's really all you can do is just stems.
Yeah.
But yeah, an actual project file, that would be pretty big.
Yep.
Well, I think that's pretty good for today. I think we covered some good topics.
Agreed.
I'm really excited to see how your project turns out. Does your song that you worked on have a name?
Yeah, it does. As of now, the title is Singularity.
Singularity. You always have these spicy names. Very, very sciencey, very spacey.
Well, this time, I guess luck was on my side because the theme for season 2 is to be sort of a future and I don't know, futuristic music or something like that. So that's what they told me. So I thought, all right, Singularity is kind of futury, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say it works.
Physics is timeless.
That's a powerful statement. That's a band name or an album title or a tweet at the very least. All right. Well, I think that'll do it for Phase Cancellation, episode 1. And if you're thinking, well, wait, there was already another episode. How is this episode 1? We started on episode 0. That wasn't my idea. It was Jort's idea because he's a programmer and things in programs start on 0. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So we'll see you sometime next month with Phase Cancellation episode 2. Until then, I have been Ohm The Protector.
Jorts, thank you for listening.
We'll see you next time. Take care.
Have a good one.